Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time to dive into another true pairing. That being those pairings that you can't believe actually happened in canon, but oh boy, did they ever. This time we've got to go back to a fandom we have to go back to a lot on this show, that being Star Trek. But this time we're not going quite as far back as we normally do. We're only going to the next generation. That's because I have to bring you Q and Lwaxana, the book that pairs Lwaxana Troi and Q. Who was asking for this? I'm not really sure, but boy am I glad it exists. This book comes from the series of Star Trek tie-in novels, and Star Trek has quite the history of tie-in novels, to the point where there's actually a book called Voyages of the Imagination that details the history of them. It's really interesting, so if you're into tie-in novels, it's worth checking out. The world of Star Trek tie-in novels is an interesting one. There are some high highs and some low lows. With all that out of the way, let's meet the players. Starting with Lwaxana Troi, mother to ship's counselor Deanna Troi in canon and wife of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry in real life. Majel Barrett also played Nurse Chapel in the original series, as well as having a role in the pilot that was ultimately turned into the two-part The Menagerie. On top of all that, she was also the voice of the ship's computer. Lwaxana is a bit of a polarizing character in that people tend to have a strong reaction to her. People either love her or hate her, which is understandable as her personality is very large. When she first appears, she is very much used for comedy, with the joke being that she's looking for love and is very aggressive about it. Her search typically revolves around pursuing people who are not overly interested, though that does change over time. Some found this joke offensive and deemed it sexist, as the joke appears to be at the expense of female sexuality, which is already a minefield when it comes to fictional depictions. However, it must be pointed out that the overzealous and unwanted lover has long been a staple of comedy, and it is not limited to the female gender. Although gender does play a role in how each portrayal is received, and they both have different implications, both positive and negative, although for both the comedy does derive from them being rejected. However, in this case, it is true that much of the supposed comedy is meant to be taken from Lwaxana being past her prime, along with other irritating female-based traits, such as being a meddling matchmaker mom, also played for comedy. Over time, her character mellowed, and while those traits remained, they were placed in more dramatic episodes and actually used to make salient points rather than just played for laughs. However, there were some fans who always liked her, stating that those traits made her different and made her stand out. They liked her brash out there personality, and were fine with her not being perfect and going a bit too far, feeling it made her a more nuanced character, even if the comedy in which her personality was placed was very broad. And some simply found it funny and felt there was nothing wrong with it.
Longing still for that which longer nurseth the disease.
Tell me more.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
As always with comedy, your mileage may vary. Regardless of how one felt about her, the facts were Lwaxana was a passionate individual with a romantic streak and a lust for life, with a personality that refused to be tempered by those around her. A personality that had a tendency to appear even larger given how reserved most of the core members of the TNG cast's characters tended to be. She is also a bit of a busybody, aided by her betazoid empathic abilities and culture, but she also has a thoughtful side and large capacity for grief that she chooses to keep in check with a positive attitude that at times borders on oblivious or abrasive. And lest we forget, she is an ambassador. Daughter of the 5th house, holder of the sacred chalice of Rix, heir to the holy rings of Betazed. Love her or hate her, there was definitely no ignoring her. Next up, Q, who, while similarly obnoxious, albeit for different reasons, was in general better received. Q is also a very large character who is based in archetypes. For him, the trickster, a godlike being with massive powers who comes to meddle with his lessers, sometimes well-meaning and other times malevolent. Q made some significant contributions to the series, and in some ways serves as a framing device for the entirety of TNG thanks to the test of humanity that both opens and closes the series. Q is arrogant and narcissistic, yet also carries a strong desire to be liked, even if it is by lesser beings, especially Picard. In fact, in the quest for Picard's approval, him and Lwaxana share some similarities. Q's obvious desire for Picard's approval ultimately led to them being one of the more popular pairings in the TNG fic-verse, right up there with DeForge, the pairing of Data and Geordi. Q clearly possesses emotions, but is phenomenally terrible at interpreting them in humans. Capable of having his ego bruised, interactions with him can often prove dangerous, though he is also quick to move on to the next event. His character was shrouded in mystery and had some hidden histories with other characters that made him intriguing to some. He is also capable of displays of kindness as well as genuine affection for a select few he cares about. However, his obnoxiousness and the way his presence would occasionally completely derail the plot led to him also being a character who is either loved or hated. There are some who feel ambivalent about these two, but they are a rare breed. Basically, Basically, either people tune in for their episodes or turn them right off. Q's arc ends up exceeding Lwaxana's as he continues into Voyager for a significant arc, but for our purposes, the focus shall be on the Q of TNG years, so one who is much less emotionally mature. Both of these characters became key pieces of Trek lore and typically appeared at least once per season, although Lwaxana did not appear in season 6, but she made up for it by appearing on DS9 3 times. Q also misses a season, his being 5. However, he makes up for it by appearing twice in some other seasons. He also made a cameo appearance on DS9, but the less said about that, the better. Despite these two's popularity, they never appeared together, at least not on screen. So Star Trek tie-in novels to the rescue. Q and Law was written by the incomparable Peter David, who is well known in sci-fi and genre circles, and is the author of many a comic, novel, and screenplay. He's well known for being able to get the voices of characters and create works that feel very authentic because of it. As a result, this book plays out very much like a lost episode, which is either a positive or a negative depending on what you want out of these tie-ins. So what are we dealing with plot-wise here? Well, we have your typical there's a delegation coming to the Enterprise because it's the only ship in the area as usual, and the flagship to boot. At first it's all pretty standard, even after Lwaxana's loud arrival. That is, until Q shows up and decides that he's gonna test the human concept of love. Because why not? He decides he's going to test it on Lwaxana, who displays of course some interest in him because she does with pretty much every single male character she comes across. What ensues is a romance to last a whole 252 pages. It goes about as well as you'd expect.
Horror. Horror.
Q ultimately ends up playing with her, even though he kind of has feelings for her, as is always the trope when someone ends up playing with somebody else romantically, and Lwaxana ends up getting Q-like powers after finding out about how she's been had, and that goes about as well as you'd expect. The novel was published in 1991, which would have it coming out during the 5th season of TNG. As for the contents, it is easy to place them in that time period. Although, according to Voyages of the Imagination, it was almost never published at all, and was only put out at the insistence of Majel Barrett. It appears not many felt this was the strongest showing for a story, which is actually rather unsurprising, as the idea of Q exploring the human concept of love had already been partially dealt with in the season 4 episode Cupid, otherwise known as the Robin Hood episode. The idea would again be revisited in greater detail on Voyager. However, it is still stronger than some other tie-in novels and is certainly not the worst. Although, were it not for this rare pair, it would not be overly notable. However, I have to say the best part about this book is that there is an audio version that has the two actors in question reading their roles. That's right, you actually get John Delancey as Q and Majel Barrett as Lwaxana Troi. They divide up the rest of the characters by sex, so it's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, there's no Patrick Stewart doing Picard, but hey, you can't have everything. I'll take what I can get. That's pretty awesome. So if you're one of those people who's into rare pairs and just likes to imagine what would happen if any random characters got together, then this is definitely the book for you. It answers all your questions, and thanks to Peter David, they're very much in character. It's very fun for a brief interlude into a rare pair featuring some side characters that are either very beloved or pretty hated. So if you're a hater of either of these characters, you don't want Star Trek number 18. You don't want it. However, if you like these characters, this novel is fun, even if it isn't high art. It plays out like a one-and-done episode, the kind that almost never comes about again in continuity, and it introduces a pairing that most had not thought of and still do not think of. There isn't a clamoring for this couple by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an interesting one-off. The novel aptly does not have this relationship work out, as it's hard to imagine two strong personalities such as theirs being able to tolerate each other for long. Lwaxana beating Q with a cartoon mallet seems like an apt conclusion. Lwaxana may be looking for love and companionship, but Q is not, and if he were, it wouldn't be with her. Though, if this appeals to you, by all means, give them the happy ending you feel they deserve. Start this pairing up again, or at all. Keep it alive. So if you could have any random Star Trek pairing, what would it be? Let me know in those comments down below. I'm sitting over here with this rare pair, Kira Nerys and Damar. It would never happen. It would be so awful. There's so much wrong with it, and yet, I want to see it happen. So I have to say, thank you so much for the warm reception to this new format. It's been great. I can film more and get more out there, and I'm really glad that you guys are liking it. I can also see the poster is warbling pretty hard. It's raining pretty hard up here in Canada, but that's all right. So thanks for coming with me for yet another adventure into the land of shipping. Sometimes the true pairings are even weirder than the ships. Catch you guys next time. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all my patrons for helping make this possible. If you're interested in helping out with that, link is down below. And as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.